Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Rance. I run the TMUG for Trend Micro user groups. This particular TMUG, we're going to be covering, this is the TMUG for November 19th, and we're going to be covering the cloud security posture management utilizing the Trend Micro Cloud Conformity product. And as always, we may dip into a little bit of the other products and how they interact with that, just to give you a good security posture management within your environment. But we have Sergio who's going to run us through the product, and Antonio is available for any kind of deep dive technical questions that may come up in general. So with that, I will pass it over to Sergio and Antonio, and take us away, guys.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, good evening. So like Jeff said, my name is Sergio Avila. I'm one of the sales engineers here for the Great Lakes region. Assisting today with a little bit of an overview for cloud conformity. So real quick, I'm just going to give you kind of a high level understanding as to where kind of cloud conformity comes into play, why, and then from there, jump into the console, kind of go through some things, and feel free to ask any questions throughout the today's TMUG, just so that way I'm not sitting here just talking and talking and talking, right, the entire time. So let's try to make this as interactive as much as possible, please. All right, so let me first off share my screen, make sure that you guys can actually see that. I promise I'm not going to bore you to death with PowerPoint, but I do have to share my screen. Are you guys able to see the Trend Micro Cloud One, Cloud One Conformity screen here with my mouse?
We can. Yes.
Okay, awesome. For some reason, my entire thing went black. So here we go. So cloud conformity, right? Really what it's going to come down to is giving you more of a simplified, unified, and central place where you're really going to be able to, in essence, see the governance and kind of security posture within your cloud environment. So as there's been a massive shift from traditional physical type virtual level environments within the actual infrastructure design and moved on to the public cloud, there's also been a massive kind of ramp up, if you will, in the sense of how that adoption has taken place and how quickly a lot of us in the IT industry have had to either get certified, understand the architecture, and really understand all the ins and outs of those type of environments in the public cloud. So some of the actual challenges themselves that we run across and kind of see are really in a number of different areas, right? So some of the more common ones are really that there are four levels of, there's four areas, right, in which Trend Micro has kind of predicted that in 2020, 2021, the security experts are going to really need that extra, how can I put it, security around those possible vulnerabilities and that can be exploited, right, and breaches. So when it starts becoming down into weak links within the actual DevOps pipelines, when we start looking at serverless type of environments, right? So if you're leveraging anything like the AWS Lambda, Azure functions, and so on. Also looking at vulnerabilities within containers themselves. That's also another area of key concern. And then ultimately down to the misconfigurations of the actual public cloud itself, right? When we start talking about the misconfigurations, really there's five kind of key misconfiguration areas. Most common are like the storage access, secret management, things that are being disabled and or around the monitoring side, and really the lack of validation, right? So understanding, where, for example, you may have an exposed S3 bucket out in AWS, or something that is actually not currently encrypted that probably should be encrypted, and things of that sort. Other key challenges other key challenges for the actual admin overhead really comes down to, great, so now we're dealing with public cloud, and now we're dealing with 70 plus different levels of services, if not more, that these public cloud providers are giving us access to be able to kind of move forward and build our architectures in those public clouds. But then what does that really mean for me as the actual admin, right? If I'm looking at a solution that is going to look at security and compliance for that type of environment, A lot of those key, some of those key areas that are kind of at the forefront for customers are, how am I supposed to have visibility into my entire AWS infrastructure out of one single location? What if we have multiple AWS accounts, as an example, or Azure accounts? What about the actual alerting overload, right? That's great that you guys have, there might be a solution out there, but what is the alerting going to really do for me? And how am I able to actually prioritize when and where I need to actually focus my attention to? And then also it comes down to the lack of really like I kind of mentioned, sometimes the lack of knowledge around these public cloud infrastructures, right? So like AWS and Azure as an example. Because of that adoption becoming so because of that adoption being so fast, especially now in today's day and age, you may not have the time or the resources. You may be wearing more than 50 hats within your organization to actually go ahead and take the time and have the resources to really get fully ramped up into some of these public clouds. And you're kind of possibly skating at I don't want to call it the bare minimum necessarily, but enough to, get in there, design, and be kind of a little dangerous, right? And then finally, the changes that are happening in the industry, right? These changes are constantly coming in and out. That's not something that is changing anytime sooner or slowing down by no means. So really, how do you keep up with these industry standards and compliance requirements as well, such as NIST and HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, and so on? So with that said, those are again just some of the key areas of why do I need something different? Why do I even care about this? What where does it kind of fit into the whole scheme of things? And this is where cloud conformity comes into play, right? The biggest thing with cloud conformity is that we're going to give you, in essence, a actual single place that you can have real-time visibility around your security and also your governance, for the actual public cloud itself. It's really going to provide you that full-blown visibility into any sort of misconfigurations within the environment, provide you also remediation steps to resolve said vulnerabilities, and there's really the full key automation for that continuance of assurance throughout the actual organization. So with that said, that's kind of, like I promised, I only had a couple slides that I wanted to actually show. From there, let me actually get into the console itself and give you a little bit of a rundown here. All right, so I killed that. Are you able to see my conformity environment here?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect, thank you. So this is Trend Micro's Cloud One cloud conformity solution here, right? So as I mentioned, once we actually start going down the process of integrating accounts into cloud conformity, this is essentially kind of the dashboard that you would be welcomed to when first logging in and actually managing and viewing your public clouds. In this particular case, you can see up top, I have 18 different AWS accounts along with 3 Azure accounts. As an overview, as a summary, as we kind of scroll down a little bit, you're able to see some of those compliance percentages across the board throughout my different accounts. So as an overall, we're sitting at a 67% compliance, right? So obviously it could be better. As part of this too, you're also able to see the actual rules that have either succeeded and or failed, right? So kind of giving you a little bit of that breakdown as to where things fall into. Moving on down real quick, we actually have a couple of different key areas that you see within your actual dashboard. So the first thing being your compliance level comparison, right? So as I mentioned, there's about 21 accounts in this particular account. So with that said, you're actually able to compare every single one if you chose to, right, across the board, and actually have more of that visibility, as you can see. When we start getting into that threat monitoring piece, so with the solution itself, it is actually licensed in 2 different ways. There's an essentials piece, and then there's an advanced piece. The advanced is going to give you that real-time monitoring that comes into play with our actual bots, which are actually running in the environment and doing those checksums of those set rules. As you can see in this particular case, we have two particular environments, or two accounts that currently don't have that, right? So it does bring it to the forefront to let you know which accounts are actually not currently leveraging if you are choosing to take advantage of that real-time monitoring. From there, these are pretty kind of straightforward kind of widgets here, if you will. You have your user activity, and then you also have your event monitoring, right? Obviously, if you needed to see any sort of particular activity based on who and where they're actually logging in, this is something that you're able to see. So, for example, root account under the DBO AWS account, and you can see the history of kind of where all that has fallen into place. Same thing with the event monitoring piece of it, if I can actually get that load. All right, moving on though, we do have the compliance status, right? So this compliance status here is actually broken up into we align it basically with the AWS, well-architected framework, right? So really what we're trying to achieve here more than anything is giving you the ability to not only achieve your operational excellence, reliability, and performance efficiency within the actual public cloud organization, but doing that in the most cost-effective way while achieving the fullest level of security. That's really what the well-architected framework is in essence doing for you. That's, and anytime you go through any of the certifications, you talk to anybody at AWS or anyone that does anything alongside with AWS, that is the key component to it. And that is what Cloud Conformity is really trying to achieve for you. That doesn't mean, though, that all we look at is the AWS well-architected framework, which I'll go into here shortly. The next two bullet points real quick is going to be the compliance level evolution, right? So this is just kind of giving you more of an actual history of where these accounts have kind of resided. And ideally, the best thing here is to have the highest level of peaks, right? In this particular view, this is taking all of the accounts together and giving you that compliance level evolution view. If we dive in individually, that would be a different story. So this view might be different for one particular account in AWS or one particular account in the Azure side of the world. And then ultimately down at the bottom here, we also have the ability to break it out into, for example, the AWS regions. So as you can kind of see here, we are leveraging regions throughout the world within all these different accounts. However, in the Americas, as an example, it's bringing to the forefront through these actual radio buttons a high risk alert, as you will see, with giving us the North Virginia region as an example as to where we really need to come in and improve some of this compliancy as of to where it stands. And last but not least is the most critical failures. Okay, so this piece here, this is again on an overview perspective. So what I mean by that is here it's bringing in all your accounts and giving you the ability to see, first of all, who the provider is, right? Azure, AWS, the risk level as of to what is deemed by the Cloud Conformity bot as to where we need some improvement. And then ultimately you can dive down further into and see the different accounts that are falling within this failure rule status. Within this actual view too, you have a couple of different options, and then I'll actually kind of show this as well within the individual accounts. But for example, you may actually have access to this AWS account, but maybe S3s are not, S3 buckets are really not something that you are in charge of. Maybe that is somebody else within the organization that you have to delegate that to. You can actually send the rule itself to, there we go. You can send the rule itself to someone else to actually take care of and admin this. So that's something that you do have the ability to do from a resolution standpoint there. You also have the ability to possibly, to come in here and configure the actual rule itself. So in this case, this S3 bucket has public access, right? Typically you may not want this S3 bucket to have public access, but this might actually be part of a web server or something like that, and you actually do require that public access. So you can also leverage tags within the solution itself. So let's say, for example, in this one, I would want to leverage the public tag. So I would name it as so, give it a note as to why I'm assigning this public tag, and then go ahead and actually save the rule settings. Another thing I can also do while being in here is adjust the rule severity level. So this is key as well to really customizing it to your organizational needs and really what your organization truly requires from an actual compliancy standpoint. To conformity, this comes in as a very high risk, right? However, to you, it might not be a very high. It could possibly fall into a low, or it could possibly fall into an extreme, right? So we can adjust these things accordingly as need be from your standpoint as well. Alongside with configuring the rules and kind of setting the rules to other admins within the actual organization, you also have the ability to suppress. So essentially, kind of mute these alerts, if you will. Anytime you go ahead and suppress for a possible false positive or things of that sort, you do have to add a note in order to go ahead and actually suppress it. Once you add that note, you will see it in the previous notes section down below as to kind of the history as to why it is being justified to kind of be overlooked. And then ultimately and finally, we have the resolution piece of it, right? So how do we, it's great that, excuse me, it's great that Conformity is alerting on this rule that has failed in 3 different accounts, as you can see, for this particular S3 bucket having public access. But how do I resolve it? Maybe I'm someone that unfortunately doesn't have that deep of knowledge as to in the AWS infrastructure. Well, we pretty much kind of hit the resolve button here. And what's beautiful is this is going to take us into the knowledge base. So a couple of things to note within the actual knowledge base itself. So first off, it's going to give you a quick overview as to the risk level and why something falls within that risk level. But then also, as you can see down below, we also give you the ability to see what pillars it's kind of assigned to, right, within the AWS well-architected framework. In this case, it's security, right? It's a security risk. As we kind of scroll down, that's where you start getting that audit and remediation piece of things. So what's really cool with this is that you're able to, whichever flavor is your forte. Some folks actually prefer logging into the AWS console and doing everything step by step there. Other folks prefer using the AWS CLI to the command line interface, right? We give you a full-blown step-by-step instruction on not only how to audit, but then also the remediation and resolution piece of things to rectify that rule. So I feel like I've been talking for a little bit and kind of ranting. I'll kind of open it up. Are there any questions so far at all out there? And I'm still going to dive into a couple of other pieces, but just in general with what we've kind of covered at this point. Okay, so I'll take the silence as a good thing, hopefully, and we'll go from there. So let me go ahead and actually pick on a AWS account here, right? So for example, to kind of show you a little bit more of what it looks like in action as well. So I'll pick my DBO AWS account here. So as you can kind of see here, once I get more granularly into a particular account, the overview is going to be the exact same for the most part, right? So you still have your summary compliance score, any of the actual activity, both from a user activity and an event monitoring piece, your compliance status across the board. So very different numbers here, as you can see, based on what we're actually seeing as a whole and what you're seeing as an individual, right? So clearly some of these need a lot of work to have done. As I also mentioned, that evolution is also very different, right? So in the previous screen, we actually had a couple of spikes within the actual evolution piece of it. In this case, it's pretty flatlined across the board. And if anything, it's actually tanked since November 8th, which is not a good thing, right? So obviously some work there, and then also your region piece of it, along with your critical failures. But the biggest thing that actually you get with the more granular deep dive into the individual accounts is this browse all checks radio button that you get here. So the beautiful part about this is that this is where you actually start getting into the weeds of seeing these failures and or these rules, and really being able to hone down, especially if you're trying to meet certain compliances like NIST, HIPAA, GDPR, and so on. So to kind of show you what I mean by that, it's great that it's showing me all the checks. So since the last conformity bot has been run, I've gotten 167 checks on my particular account. 61 of them have failed, 106 have succeeded. That's great. But what does that really mean when I'm trying to stand this up against, let's say, the NIST architected framework, right? So if I actually hover over, let's say, to the standard or framework tab here, I can actually pull this tab down here and say, I want to see how it stands up against NIST. And now I'm actually able to see up against NIST where I need some work and where I've have had some success. So clearly, in this case, I've had success in quite a number of my S3 buckets, but my secure transport, I've failed, right? How do I resolve it? Same thing, right? If I click that resolve button, I'm going to get back to that knowledge base article and kind of figure out how to actually remediate that. Whether it's, again, we're talking about NIST, whether we're talking about, let's just say HIPAA, right? And, or let's say the PCI side of the world, you can see how it pretty much kind of stacks up, right? Other things that I can do in the view rule side is also filter these actual checks. So I might not really care, obviously, as to, hey, what I've succeeded in. Maybe my focus should focus more so on the lines of what's actually failed. So as you can see, as I start kind of filtering this down, I can bring it down to now from 167 checks. I can actually bring it down to just those 61 that had actually failed. From there, I might not actually really be worried too much with the low and the mediums of the world. I actually want to maybe focus more on the high to the extreme side. Once I actually start narrowing down where I should really focus my attention to, as you can see, I went from 61 down to 6. So obviously that's a big difference in the where do I really need to focus my attention to. And then ultimately, as I kind of go up a little bit, I can also decide whether or not I want to base it off of one of the actual standards or frameworks, or possibly maybe a particular category. Maybe in my case, I want to focus it off of the AWS well-architected framework, right? So as you can see, once I kind of come down here, I'm down to 1, which is my S3 bucket, right? So basically having the encryption piece on there and not being enabled. If I didn't select that though, as you can see, I still have my EC2 instance here, but here's a key thing though. I can also narrow it down by services. So maybe in my level of responsibilities, I might not actually be so focused on having to worry about EC2 instances, and maybe my focus is more S3 based. I can actually focus on that particular S3 service that I'm more responsible for within my organization. And now I'm narrowing it down, right? So there's a lot of customization, a lot of kind of filtering that you can do within the actual solution to try to make your life a lot easier. So that's really part of kind of narrowing down some of this filtered base criteria, looking at some of the rules, and then kind of really going down, narrowing down where you should really focus your attention to. The conformity bot itself does run every hour, essentially, and you can come in here and run it manually if you choose to. It also does tend to run when there is a modification done within your AWS or cloud environment as well. And then from there, the only other thing that I kind of wanted to bring up to as well is this template scanner, right? So for anyone that's leveraging CloudFormation templates within the organization, this actual CloudFormation template scanner is really helpful, because whether you're actually trying to see if your template has any possible pre-existing issues, so if it's already something that's been launched, or you want to be proactive and actually do more of the actual scan before you release it and launch it, you can actually throw the CloudFormation template through the scanner itself and actually see it live. So as an example here, I have a version of a cloud template, a CloudFormation template here, so you can kind of see some of the actual attributes that it's actually looking for. Excuse me. And then from there, if I just kind of browse it, snag it in here, right? So it's a YAML. And then I'm going to just go based off of, let's say, the default rule settings that I already have. The scan itself shouldn't really take too long at all. It usually takes a couple seconds. And then once it actually finishes, there we go. It'll actually spit back the same level of type of result findings that you've seen in the previous sections, right? So here we're able to see, in essence, everything that's been successfully passed, and then we also have our failures. And then same thing, how do we resolve these these failures? We also have integration too. So that's something else that I also wanted to maybe touch base on a little bit here. We do have integration to ticketing, a multitude of different ticketing services. So for example, if I come into my settings and into my communication settings, here is a place where I can actually show you. Here we go. So we have, for example, Slack, PagerDuty, Jira, right? If you're leveraging the Amazon SNS channels as an example, or the ServiceNow channels as well, we have communications into those. And in essence, this is where you would kind of come in and start that configuration process to create those channels as well. Let me see. Is there any questions at this point? I've kind of gone through quite a bit of what conformity is and does. Anyone have anything?
I have a question.
Sure. Go for it.
You showed the cloud conformity template scanner, and it does CloudFormation files. Does it do like Terraform or anything like that?
It does, yes, sir. So if you're leveraging, yes, thank you for that. So if you are leveraging Terraform, you are able to run that through the CloudFormation template scanner as well. Sorry, I got a really bad itch.
And then for you highlighted the ability to resolve configuration issues within things like your S3 buckets and that. How well does that switch over to an Azure environment? Can you do the auto remediation or resolution or whatever of the problems in those environments?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more thing because it was cutting off in my...
So the you mentioned where you can do an you can click on the resolve button, it'll show you how to resolve it. In some cases, have it automatically resolve the issue.
Right, the auto remediation piece.
Yeah. Does that work for Azure as well, or is that just an an Amazon an Amazon functionality?
Actually, yeah. So that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I would have to double check on that one for you. I know for sure it's on the AWS side. I'm not 100% sure if Azure already has the auto remediation piece of it. So I would have to double check and get back to you on that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Maybe another thing I can show is basically adding, right, an account as an example. So we do have the ability to come in and just add accounts as need be. So the adding of the accounts is pretty straightforward, really. You either choose, at this point in time, we have AWS and Azure integration, right? So just to continue to pick on AWS, if I come in here, apart from following the very simple and very self-guided how-to help video, in essence, all we're really doing here is you're giving your account a name and then labeling a environment, right? So maybe this is my prod environment. From there, once I'm in here, I should be able to then select one of the two following deployment or authentication types. The first one is the automated setup, which is the most recommended. Really here, what you're doing is we're leveraging a CloudFormation template to really enable that cross-account access. Part of the reason that the CloudFormation template is actually the more recommended, I would say, approach to things is that it's going to also provide a much easier way to also roll out any updates and enhancements that are being done. When we go down the manual setup process, I'm not saying that that's not necessarily the case, but there is a little bit of more work that has to be done. So if I was to select the automated setup piece of it, from there, as you can kind of see, it's just going to pretty much ask me for a couple of different attributes. And if anybody here wanted to actually see what that template kind of looks like, of what it's actually, oh, of course, of what it's actually pulling up. Of course, that would happen. Let me see. I don't want to hit the play button, but basically what it is really it's all just read access type of processes that are happening, right? So there is no writes, nothing of that sort. So really all it's doing is just pulling in all the actual data into Cloud Conformity through the bot itself and the template. Any other questions, comments, concerns, moans and groans?
Does this tie into any other Trend products?
Yeah, so Conformity is definitely just one part actually of our Cloud One architecture, right? So as I mentioned in the beginning, I did call this the Trend Micro Cloud One Cloud Conformity solution itself. So part of the entire process of really adopting the cloud and becoming more of a native security, I'll say player or partner in that space specifically, is that we do have other solutions in place that fall within the Cloud One side of the world. So with Cloud One, we have your workspace or your workload security, right? Which for anyone here that's very possibly familiar with deep security, that is essentially where that workload security comes into play. We have container scanning or container security, I'm sorry, along with the smart check side of the world. So being able to integrate into that side of the world. We also have the network security piece, which we're looking at the VPCs of your public cloud and making sure that there's no vulnerabilities that could possibly be exploited and protecting those certain channels. Then we start getting into the application control. So really looking at Lambda, excuse me, more so Lambda microservices type of functions and making sure that that layer is also covered. And then we also have file storage security. I believe it's the actual name if my memory serves me right. And that is looking at security across the board for your S3 buckets or Azure blobs. So those are the other 5, along with the Cloud Conformity side of the world.
And is this, I'm assuming this is a separate product, or is it part of a suite or anything along those lines?
Well, the product, so yeah, so Conformity itself, you can purchase it, I believe a couple of different ways. The most common is, buying it through the actual marketplace if you're looking to do consumption or something like that. But in essence, yeah, you can buy it separately. Off the top of my head, I don't recall if it does come as part of a full suite apart from that. But there is, like I mentioned, there is 2 versions of Conformity. So there's the Essentials, and then there's the Advanced. So real kind of quick with the Essentials itself, you're pretty much getting everything that we talked about and everything that I kind of showed you. So whether that's having the access to 600 plus different rules sets, the API driven integration, all the reporting, all the kind of profile creations, the CloudFormation template scanner, that auto remediation that we just kind of spoke of a little bit. You get all that with the Essentials. The Advanced is going to give you that real time threat monitoring piece. So that way, as you're making kind of changes or configurations within the environment, it's being seen in real time. So to actually show that as well, let me actually do that to kind of show you how this actually plays out. So as you see, I'm inside the S3 services. So I'm going to be basically creating a bucket, right? So let's call this the tmug, oh wait, hold on. Tmug test bucket, right? It's fine, I'll leave it here. But for this example, I'm going to go ahead and just give it public access. And yes, I acknowledge. And we're also going to leave the bucket versioning disabled along with the encryption as well disabled. So I'm just kind of doing this on the fly to just kind of create the bucket itself. So as you can see, I've just created that S3 bucket. If I come back to my cloud conformity and I go into my DBO, I can either wait for this bot to run, or I can also just go ahead and run the actual bot itself. Now, again, the bot itself is going to take a couple of seconds to kind of do its thing. But in the meantime, as you've kind of seen, already, I'm already seeing some of this activity happening in real time, right? This is part of that advanced edition, if you will, that you receive with this. So not only is it showing you a few seconds ago, Sergio Avila was doing something within the actual account and or root, but then also it'll show you that a few seconds ago, a TMUG test bucket has already been created. And also that I came in here and I ran the actual bucket, or I'm sorry, the bot itself. If I scroll down, actually, let me do it this way. If I come into my filters, and I'm going to go ahead and click on S3. We should be, let's see, able to see it here. Bam, there it is. Already in here, right? So in this case, for example, this is one of the success criteria, right? That I was able to create this bucket with read access. Now, let's say if I wanted to see, okay, well, is anything failing with that particular S3 bucket? Then I can come in here and, for example, I know for a fact that I did not enable encryption as an option. So now I'm seeing that, hey, you forgot to enable encryption, right? Maybe I skipped that or what have you. And again, given whatever my regulations within my organization is, I can go ahead and take the appropriate actions to either resolve, assign the role, configure, and or suppress if need be. So with that said, that's kind of pretty much a full kind of general overview as to conformity itself. So any other questions at all from anybody?
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, Sergio, thank you very much for the overview of cloud conformity. Appreciate it. And again, if after viewing this, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, simply reach out to myself or your local trend sales engineer or sales manager, and we're happy to introduce you to the product or answer any questions you may have. And with that, I thank you for your time and wish you safe travels and keep safe out there. Thank you very much.